Hi, everyone. I'm Rena 9, and thank you for joining us. After 35 days, the longest government shutdown in U.S. history is now over. The House, Senate, and President Trump all approved a bill that funds the government for 3 more weeks. That means roughly 800,000 federal workers who have not been paid since late December will finally see a paycheck. But it does not mean that funding for a border wall, the president's key demand when the partial shutdown began, is over. At the White House,
thank you very much.
Friday, Mr. Trump said that a new spending deal must include money for border security or the government will close again. And in a tweet Saturday morning, he wrote in part, 21 days goes very quickly. Negotiations with Democrats will start immediately. We will build the wall. Nicole Killian is at the White House with the latest.
We have reached a deal to end the shutdown and reopen the federal government.
The longest government shutdown in history came to a close yesterday after President Trump agreed to fund the government for the next 3 weeks while Congress continues negotiations on border security. It came on the day that many of the 800,000 furloughed federal workers missed their second paycheck, and airports around the country experienced flight delays due to sick-outs by air traffic controllers working without pay.
I want to thank all of the incredible federal workers and their amazing families who have shown such extraordinary devotion in the face of this recent hardship.
The administration had been criticized for minimizing the toll the shutdown has had on federal workers. At a Washington food bank, they welcome the news.
It's about time. I hope that it is a little more sustainable than 3 weeks.
This for you means what?
That my family will be able to pay our bills and we'll be able to keep our homes and, be off the street and stop begging for food.
Last night, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi signed the continuing resolution after the House and Senate voted unanimously to reopen the government.
Democrats are committed to border security, and we think we have some better ideas about how to do so that protect our border, honor our values, and are cost-effective.
Negotiations will continue until mid-February, but unless a deal is reached between lawmakers over funding for a border wall, the threat of another government shutdown remains.
If we don't get a fair deal from Congress, the government will either shut down on February 15th again, or I will use the powers afforded to me under the laws and the Constitution of the United States to address this emergency.
Well, Democratic leaders have been emphatic that they won't give the president a penny to build the wall. In the meantime, the president's State of the Union speech is up in the air. It was supposed to happen this coming Tuesday, but now Speaker Pelosi says that she will work with the president on a mutually agreeable date.
And joining me now from Washington, Niles Stanich. He's a White House columnist for The Hill. So, Niall, are we going to be back in the same position, even though the shutdown might be over now? Will we be back here in 3 weeks?
We could be, but I think that the president, and more particularly the Republican Party, will be highly reluctant to do another shutdown or to get into that situation. Look, Rena, to put it bluntly, the president got his posterior kicked here. I mean, this was the most one-sided resolution of this kind of conflict, this kind of legislative conflict that I've seen in a long time. He shut down the government for more than a month, seeking funds for the border wall. He didn't get any of those funds. He's now reopened the government, and he had to do that for several reasons: falling approval ratings in the opinion polls, his own party getting increasingly restless, and, as your report pointed out, a whole lot of real-world problems with people being affected by lack of wages or snarl-ups with air travel and things of that nature. So this was a pretty disastrous episode for the president.
So you say he had his posterior handed to him, but at the same time, he's not backing away on this funding. Even potentially on Twitter on Saturday again, he called for the funding of the border wall, and he said the government shutdown could happen again, that he might even go as far as declaring a national emergency. So how is this going to play out?
Well, the national emergency is an interesting idea because, to my mind, and I've spoken to people around the president about this, they do see that as a potential route out of the impasse, politically speaking. If he declares a national emergency, he can try to circumvent Congress. Now, it would immediately face a legal challenge from Democrats and from other critics of the president, but it would enable him to say to his base that he is pressing ahead, at least in theory, with the wall, rather than have what happened in the shutdown, which was him asking Congress for money, the Democrats simply saying no, and him ultimately having to back down.
You know, this is a president who has been able to deliver on issues that his base does want, but at the same time, why is it, Niall, that he is so stuck on this issue of border security? Is it really something that resonates, and is it worth isolating independents and other people who might be on the edge?
It's a great question. It is important to the president because he promised a border wall at virtually every stop of his 2016 campaign. It was the signature promise of that campaign. I think that he feels that he needs to deliver on that to keep his base of support happy. Now, the politically difficult spot that he's in is, it is that promise which also alienates a large number of people in the centre ground and which Democrats refuse outright. He thinks that if he backs down, it will erode his base. And in fact, just in the past 12 hours or so, Rena, we have seen a number of conservative commentators be very critical of the president. So how can he get away from that sense that he has backed down without alienating more centrist or even centre-right voters? That's a difficult political conundrum, in fairness. Yeah, no, I mean, the fact that there have been some conservatives, Ann Coulter, for instance, who have really taken to him for doing this, been very vocal about it. I know Sean Hannity still backs him, but does the White House consider this to be a significant loss? Depends if you talk to them on or off the record, Rena. I mean, on the record, they are backing up the president, saying that, no, this was by no means a cave, that he did something that was for the greater good, that served the public. But a former Trump White House official told me that he regarded this as an unmitigated disaster for the president. People who have some knowledge of national politics don't, in their heart of hearts, think that the president has won or even drawn this fight. They recognise it as a defeat. The White House is now trying to put a brave face on that, partly because they know that to admit defeat or to admit that the president backed down would be politically perilous in the extreme. In a tweet Saturday morning, the president thanked the Republican National Committee for voting unanimously to endorse him in the 2020 election. The RNC even passed a resolution Friday saying that Mr. Trump was a pragmatic, energized president who shares and understands the will of the American people. The Koch brothers, however, announcing they're not going to back someone in 2020. How important is it to make sure that the president isn't primaried and that he's firming up his base? It's very important from his perspective. For any sitting president, facing a primary challenge from a member of your own party is very dangerous. George H.W. Bush, for example, faced a primary challenge from Pat Buchanan, which was regarded as having weakened Bush for the subsequent general election. There has always been an uneasy marriage between President Trump and the Republican Party. There have always been fears among Trump loyalists that the party establishment has been trying to undermine him. So I think this announcement and the fact that the Trump people, the Trump loyalists, have installed a number of their people in or around the RNC, that should put some of those anxieties to rest, or at least ease them. I want to ask you, before you go, of course, about President Trump's longtime associate and former campaign advisor, Roger Stone, indicted Friday on 7 counts related to the Mueller investigation. I'm curious what folks are really saying at the White House with this latest development. At the White House, they're trying to distance themselves as much as possible from Roger Stone. And to be fair, Roger Stone did only play a part in the very early stages of the president's election campaign, at least in an official role. Now, he has a relationship with the president going back decades. But at the White House, they're never really particularly keen to get into the details of the Russian matter or the Mueller investigation. They acknowledge, I think, that it is politically embarrassing to have a decades-long ally of the president indicted in this fashion, but they're really trying to maintain a wall of separation between the administration as it is now and some of these colourful figures from the president's past, like Roger Stone.
All right, Niles Stanage, grateful you could join us today, Niall. Thank you.
Thanks, Rena.